Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 47, talking about writer's block or finding your passion when you fall off the horse, getting back on.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, so I am back finally, and this has been really interesting the last couple of months, and I just want to quickly say that I'm so overwhelmed and so grateful for all the amazing emails, messages, everything I've received, pretty much saying like, where the hell's the podcast? And I need to get my fix every week. So I just want to say thank you for all the kind messages and inquiries and also support as well. And basically the past couple of months have been really full on in a lot of ways. And at the same time, like I've been doing the podcast for now a year. It's got to be coming up. Like I think it's a few weeks away from a year. And consistently as well, which I know almost this time last year, it was like first week of December, I believe. I was in Vegas, and I remember that week I was putting out, or that month I was putting out something like 3 to 5 episodes a week, and that was brutal, but it was something I just had so much passion and so much stuff that I'd been giving away at talks, and also just people I work with. There's just a lot of relevant stuff that I wanted to put out as much as I could. And the thing is about these episodes is that I don't want to just kind of put together a few episodes where it's just a big rant. It's more every episode that I've put out, I've wanted it to be something where it really is like a very solid piece of content that even myself, like I think that I'd be able to go back and listen to and be like, wow, like that was actually, kind of useful. And I'm pretty sure I will at some point come back to some of my own, just because I think that, at least for me, of course, they're pretty relevant in terms of your career and a lot of other stuff. So at least for the ones that I've been developing myself, it's always a lot of work. It usually ends up being a few days of work to put together an episode, including the research, the preparation, the actual doing it. Because essentially, I mean, if you were to give a keynote speech at a conference, something like that, you might spend weeks on that 45 minutes or hour that you're up there. And putting them out consistently has definitely been a lot of work. And it's something that, I've been doing and funding myself. So it's more for fun, but also a chance to kind of give back. And this has definitely changed my life, doing this podcast and being able to contribute to others, and even just getting so much amazing emails from people who've gotten their dream job because they've followed a lot of the stuff that has come from each episode that we've been putting out. One other thing I just want to mention really quick is that for the next couple of months, I'm going to be putting out a lot of really cool new content. I'm going to be spending the next couple of months leading up till Christmas, basically putting out new tutorials, new material. If you enjoyed a lot of the free PDFs I gave, such as cover letters, stuff like that, I'm going to be working on a lot of new stuff. And in addition to that, I want to do a couple of career intensives, which I've mentioned before, but I've just been figuring out the logistics of this. And one thing I'd love to try, and I haven't yet, but I'm going to be doing it very soon, is I want to try and do a few on Periscope. And for anyone who's not familiar, Periscope was bought by Twitter. It's essentially a kind of video broadcasting tool. So I'm able to use my phone and be, essentially do a FaceTime with everyone where, essentially I can talk and you guys can all chat. And rather than needing to schedule anything right now, I just want everyone to kind of go and sign up for it. And, I'm not being scammy or anything. I'm just basically saying like sign up because probably next episode I'm going to announce a few dates that I'll be doing a few of these. And after that, like depending on how well it goes, I might start to do a free-for-all. What will happen is basically it's owned by Twitter. So if you have a Twitter account, you just log in using that. And that's what I did. So, it just means that whenever there's a broadcast, what will happen is it'll pop pop up, on your phone just saying like Alan or whoever is broadcasting right now. So you just swipe into it and you're in like a chat room while I'll be talking, and I'll be able to interact with everyone. So I think it'll just be a fun thing to do where I can actually talk with you and you're able to ask questions via chat, and I'll be able to answer them in real time. So like I said, I've never done it, and I think it sounds really interesting, maybe a little intimidating, I don't know, but yeah, I think it'll be really fun. So for now, I just love if everyone can sign up for it. And again, you just use your Twitter handle. Your account already exists basically, and so that'll be something that I will start doing very soon. And depending on how successful it is, I'll do more of it. And also, I don't know why, but I'm constantly addicted to Instagram at the moment. I'm finding I'm on there pretty much all day long. So I've been posting a lot of stuff on there, and I'm going to be putting out a lot of cool new content pretty soon. So yeah, I think after a while, you also start to realize, you start to kind of realize what stuff you're into. Because with me, before it was just a bunch of friends, and suddenly now I'm looking at cabins in the woods, and camping, and then yachts and cigars and alcohol and architecture. So and camera gear. So I don't know what that says about me, but it's an interesting combination either way. So if you want to follow me on Periscope or Twitter or whatever, but my Twitter handle is Alan FT McKay. So ALLANFT. So Francis Thomas, and yes, that's my two middle names. McKay, MCKAY. So then my Instagram is just Alan McKay 1982. Okay, and so those are my two things. And yeah, Alan FT McKay and Alan McKay 982. And yeah, so I'll be posting and adding a lot to those. I mean, if you're bored, jump on there. I spend way too much time on Instagram as is. And but let's dive into the content. I'm kind of getting back into things, so I'm a little bit rusty. I kind of feel like my brain's slowed down a little bit just from not, having to put all this stuff out. But let's do this. And I've got some really cool other episodes coming up pretty soon as well. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about something that I think is something that we all deal with, which could be, to deal with grief, a loss in the family, physical pain or sickness, or so many different things that may be going on in your personal life that can completely derail you and your inspiration, your motivation to get your job done, and put you into a big depression. Okay, so I mention this because for me and a lot of people, I find this kind of fascinating because we all go through things like, let's say, breakups, and I want to use this example because I think that we all have had some pretty brutal and crippling breakups in our lives, I'm sure, and that's just natural. But those are the sorts of things that I see a lot where, commonly everyone has them, and how you respond to them, how you let them affect you can be pretty brutal overall in affecting your career long term and affecting a lot of your relationships with other people. And you can tend to be pretty self-destructive. There's a lot of different things that can go on, and I wanted to just kind of jump on this because I've seen it a lot. And also I think that like I said, depending on how you handle it, I think that my whole take is I've always wanted to try and keep my professional life and my personal life pretty separate. So in other words, and it's a pipe dream that I think we all hope for, but let's say you are going through some pretty brutal times, you don't let that affect your career at work. You don't let things like that mess you up. You keep your head down and you get your job done. I remember having this conversation years ago with one of the owners of Atomic Fiction, the guys who worked on Transformers and Flight and all those other films with. They just released The Walk. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. They were the only VFX facility, or I should say the primary one on that show, and they outsourced a bit of it as well. And those guys, I remember talking with the owner, or one of the owners, Kevin, about this subject. And I was basically saying that after going through a pretty big breakup, that I'm gonna keep my head down. I won't let it affect my work, blah blah blah. And I remember him saying that's kind of fucking bullshit. I mean, it will affect your work. Your work will suffer, but that's part of life. And I kind of denied that at the time, and I think for me, I've found kind of a bit of a remedy by letting the work be your distraction, But I do agree with him that no matter what, things are gonna have that bit of merge in between. But ultimately, they can go extreme where one is just really visible and evident. So for me, I've always had this whole thing where I've always wanted to have one day where I can say, okay, today's gonna suck. I'm gonna feel it. I'm gonna be miserable. and then get over it and, get back on with my life and just put it to the side. But usually it's always been something where I've just got too many people relying on me and too much responsibility to even have that one day. So, I end up going with the philosophy, which mightn't be too healthy in the long run, but basically like, look, whatever you're feeling now, put it to the side, get your work done. Again, because you have people counting on you. You need to get this done. And once the film or whatever you're doing is finished, then you can feel like crap. You can cry your eyes out or drink yourself to death, whatever you need to deal with. But for now, just get your work done. And like I said, I don't know whether that long term is always going to be a good thing, like sweeping your emotions under the rug. But by the time the project's done, I've always been kind of in that mending phase. So it's kind of worked out well where it's kind of like that. Yeah, give yourself the light at the end of the tunnel. Say you can hurt later, but get your shit done first. And during, that time you're buying to yourself to have, you're usually able to kind of let that emotion go, detach a little bit and feel better. So I think sometimes it can actually be very therapeutic to have a distraction, something that you give higher priority than your emotions, because most of us don't. They let our emotions run wild, and you deal with the consequences later. And that is what I want to mention. I mean, I want to give a few examples because I think examples are more relevant, but also hopefully a few of these might kind of ring true or relate in some way. But I remember many years ago now, I think it was the late 90s, but there was a guy who was pretty much at the beginning of his career. He's about a year into it, and he's working for the second biggest visual effects studio in Australia. And in a way, he kind of lucked in the fact that this company had gone through some restructuring. It was one of those times in any business's life that a lot of people were leaving, a lot of people were getting let go, and the whole company kind of restructured itself a little bit. And he essentially got promoted to head of 3D because there wasn't really anyone else around to jump into that position. So this was a great opportunity for him because it meant that so early into his career he managed to get put into a great position with a lot of responsibility and a chance to really kind of step up in what he's doing. And unfortunately, he was also going through or he started to go through a breakup not long after that. And this is one of those things that like that breakup shattered him, and for months, like 2 or 3 months, it literally just affected him at work and everything he did. And this wasn't like something that he was dealing with personally. I mean, everyone around him knew about it. He was depressed all the time. He wouldn't show up to work some days. Other days he'd come in and just basically get nothing done. He just became very unreliable. So I knew the guy personally, but also knew of the situation much later on through a lot of his bosses who were telling me about everything going on. So the thing was that everyone was very sympathetic. Everyone was very caring in terms of what he's going through. But this is what and why I want to mention this, because at the end of the day, it is just a business. And usually I use that on the flip side of that companies are, treating this like a business. You need to treat it like a business too. But this is on the other end where, if you're not doing your job, as much as everyone wants to be friends and look out for each other and be sympathetic, everything does revolve around money, and it revolves around things going right. And if, people are going to cut you some slack as much as they can, but if you blatantly aren't getting your job done, then it's going to have repercussions. And so for him, he got warning number 1, warning number 2, continue to get warnings, but unfortunately there's nothing he could really do about it. He was dealing with his emotions by letting them take over everything, including his career. And so it wasn't like, oh, I was going through a bit of a slum. Like, this went on for months, and he lost his job and essentially tarnished his name a little bit. And that's just something that you need to kind of keep in mind, that like, letting your emotions go rampant because you're feeling them at that one time, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to have permanent effects on your career and your life. And I've been in that situation too, where I've had staff of mine who are going through similar things and kind of having to deal with those situations. So, from personal experience, I can say that it's a really difficult situation for everyone to be in when someone you're managing or someone you even hired, and in this case, like a friend, can go through that. And like I said, it all comes down at the end of the day, it's a business, and people are relying on you to get things done. I remember I hired a compositor, the only compositor on the team, for a specific commercial, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. And I just remember like literally the week of delivery, he started coming in at noon every day when most of us were coming in at, 6, 7, 8 in the morning, just because it was final week and we had clients typically coming in at 9 a.m. Expecting to see stuff. So, to have him 2 days, 3 days in a row show up sometimes 6 hours later than everyone else. And meanwhile, we have stuff that has to go through him to get out the door. And I've had to kind of drop everything and comp all the shots. That's one of those situations again where, pulling him aside, it's like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, we're in the middle of delivering this, like, what the hell's happening? And, it's kind of hard when, obviously it's like, oh, sorry, I think my girlfriend's going to break up with me. It's like, oh, that sucks. But, we have this thing that, essentially you don't get done, you could very well get sued for. And you have to kind of face the reality of like, you all work together as a team. And as much as you all care about each other and there may be personal shit going on, as soon as it starts to affect your professional life, it's not something that you're just letting yourself down, you're letting down everyone else as well. And I don't want to be cold about that, but it is kind of the truth of it. And I know friends who are going through other things, they've gone through car crashes or other, pretty traumatic experiences, and that affects their life. And I've seen how, firsthand and also just later on, just kind of seen how that's what a lot of people will remember. It's like, oh, he was great, but then this happened and he just let everything go to shit, or she just let it all fall apart. And those are the things, unfortunately, that like your career is your track record. And if you let things slip, then, unfortunately, that is something that's going to go on your mark sheet to a degree, at least with the people that have known you and you've built that relationship with. And ultimately, you want to work with people who you have that relationship with. If you're constantly going to new studios because you burnt the bridge at the last one, that again is like a really, not the best thing. You always want to have that, you want to build that reputation around everyone as being reliable, as being able to get shit done. So that way they're all calling you up and constantly asking you to come back. And that is how you build a stable foundation in your career. So that way you never need to worry about work. It's more about, whoever I worked with for a while, like who would I love to have the opportunity to catch up with, getting the band back together basically. And like, I'll give one more example, but again, on a movie I worked on up in San Francisco, one of the artists that I was supervising, I remember, she was staring at a screen for literally days, just not getting anything done. And like, every day, dailies comes around, nothing is being produced. And eventually it's just like, hey, like, what's up? Like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, I had a fight with my boyfriend earlier this week and I'm just really distraught, and as much again as you want to say like, oh, okay, like you would have fight, that sucks. You also got to be like, hey, I'm responsible for you, and we have stuff we need to get done. So I feel for you, and if you want to go outside and talk, I completely understand. I'm here for you, but we got stuff to get done. And again, I'm just throwing out examples of this kind of thing because hopefully some of this resonates, where it's like, oh yeah, I let that happen, or I let this happen, or at least I can see how letting some of those kind of personal things come in. I remember when I was 17, I was homeless for a couple of days because I'd moved to a new city, didn't know anyone, and meanwhile, like I was still showing up to work every day because I didn't want to like fuck up my job as well as everything else going on. And I think that to me is actually, not to go on a tangent, but I think for me that actually was one of those moments that did kind of change my whole outlook on letting your personal life affect your professional life. Because I was, basically new job, new city, probably the biggest job I'd ever gotten at the time, working for the biggest games studio in Australia. And basically having like all the shit in my personal life fall apart. And as much as I was letting it, like trying not to allow it to affect my professional life, it still does happen. And, for me, it was like rushing out and trying to find houses and do all that kind of stuff. Like basically bit by bit, it was all kind of weighing me down. And the only time I've ever gotten let go in my entire career was actually that job. And, again, I'll mention this because I think that, anything, all these sorts of things, I think, hopefully some people can relate to. But again, like I said, I've only been able to let go once from a job, and that actually was the job. And it was because I had to learn Softimage, not XSI, but like old school SGI Softimage, and get into the whole gaming stuff on there, and dealing with not having anywhere to live, all these different things, it all kind of came together, and I ended up losing my job. And that actually, like, for about 6 months, I would have nightmares about it, which, doesn't sound too brutal these days, but I think it's just basically being homeless and then losing the one thing that, was grounding you to it all. It totally fucked me up for a good 6 months after that, where I just had, issues where I was always afraid of, of whatever, basically not having a home, and especially being a kid, I guess. But I mean, I think everything here, as much as this sounds like a therapy session, I think that it's one that I think is just so relevant to what we go through as artists, as professionals, as anyone who, we all have our personal lives, our stuff that can drastically affect us. And like I said, for me, dealing with that, it took me 6 months, and also I ended up not taking any big risks and going to the jobs, like taking on the projects I wanted to do in other cities, because I was scared shitless of that instability of of something bad happening. And so moving back to my home city, at least there I kind of felt like I have people, I have friends, and that's the worst thing can kind of happen, I guess, is that no matter what, like you at least know people, and you're going to be all right. There'll be a couch or something that you can crash on. So I think at this point though, like, what happens when you do have those things happen, whether it is you get fired, or you're going through some kind of depression. I mean, all these things end up with us having some sort of depression, whether it is, like, let's say breaking up with someone you've been with for years, or losing someone. You go through that emotional crash, and eventually the outcome is going to be that you're either self-destructive, or you just lose that motivation to kind of be charged and be hungry. And that's one thing I've always kind of mentioned on here, and with anyone I meet, is all about that importance of not having fear, and always saying yes, and really trying to tackle everything you can, and always being hungry to get ahead and be the best person that you can be, make the biggest strides that you can. And the thing is that, like, for you to have that motivation, you need to believe it. It's not like you can just kind of fake that until you make it. And so when you have that crash, like, how do you get back on top? Obviously, I think the biggest thing is to address, like, what you're going through. I mean, whatever that is, like, there's nothing you can really deal with other than accepting what's happening to you and dealing with that. But it's more, what I want to talk about is more the aftermath. Okay, so because I think the biggest thing is that once you've dealt with the issues you're going through, let's say someone leaves you, or you lose someone, whatever that is, at this point, and I think this is the biggest thing that most people have to deal with, is the fact that they feel like they've lost that momentum, they've lost the motivation to kind of keep going with what they're doing. And it's kind of like going to the gym or anything else. Like, if you're going daily, you have that momentum, you have that routine, and everything's so easy. But if you stop, even for a while, it's so much more difficult to get back on track. And in addition to that, how do you actually mentally kind of force yourself to feel it? I think the biggest thing is when we take a break from something, or we let it all slide. And like, for me, the past 2 months, I have kind of like email, especially, unless it's like literally just like waving its hands at me. There's a lot of stuff like job offers, other things I've not even opened, and it's only been like a couple of like really key things, like, where's my new camera I ordered? Where's the order status on that, or whatever? And bit by bit, all these things pile up. And I think that's the number one thing that's going to affect you, is that the more you let stuff like your responsibilities slide, the thing is that they haven't gone away, and suddenly you're dealing with this overwhelm. You've let your responsibilities build up, and you have this backlog overwhelm, and suddenly it's a lot more difficult to get back on track, and it's a lot easier to kind of keep putting it off further and further, and essentially become like really self-destructive. So whether it is you're just sitting on the couch all the time, or not giving a shit at your job, like, even if you're showing up, just not having that same kind of consistency with how you work, because essentially you're not just hurting everything now, you're actually hurting everything in the future as well. When I talk about people who've lost their jobs or other things happen because of this, it always reflects. Now, I think the biggest thing is when you are going through these situations is how to deal with it. And when you're ready, when it's like, okay, time to get my shit together, together and get up and you need to deal with this stuff, most of the time that's the scariest part, because it's a lot easier to put it off more because of this backlog overwhelm that I talk about, where basically, all those emails, all those other things that were weighing on you, like, oh, I got to do my taxes, oh, I got to renew this, I got all these bills to pay, I got people waiting on me, that thing is so overdue now, the other stuff is all overdue, all these things have built up, and without even thinking about it, you're just like, it's too much, and it's just so easy to kind of continue to hide and run away from it. And I almost think that at that point, once you've got that backlog of stuff, that's when it's a snowball effect. It basically is going to keep you running away because you don't want to address it all. And I think the key thing here is that you need to sit down and you need to write down every single thing that you have that is worrying you, everything that you have that you need to take care of, because I think at least that way it's a reality and you can choose what to do with it. And from there, I think you could put into 2 columns, which could be, one is what I need to do right now, like the things that absolutely are life and death, these need to be done. So for me right now, I'm working on a short film for someone. I'm about to go for my green card finally. And in addition, a couple other projects, basically for me, the one thing that I didn't let slide is my mentorship, because to me, that's the highest priority I have. And I've always made sure I stay consistent with that. But things like podcast, other stuff, have let that slide. And, I think it's key to kind of write down the things that are really important, life and death, you need to get done. And then everything else that you think it's like, okay, I can wait a little bit, put that in the other column. It's like, okay, this is important, but, I can deal with it later. Okay. So if you have 2 columns, one is the life and death, must get this shit done. People are waiting on me and there's no excuse that I can give to buy more time. And then the other one is these are important and I need to get them done too, but no one's going to shoot me if it's not done today, or I can negotiate my way out of doing it today. And, as hokey as I might say, like, build a list, but I think it's important to do that, because I think the biggest thing for you to get back on track is essentially to declare bankruptcy with all the shit that you have, all that overwhelm. So if you have a list, and it might be 3 things, or it might be 5 or 6, 7 things, but the stuff that, people are waiting and, you're tied to doing it, you need to get this done. You got to pay your rent or you're going to be homeless, whatever it will be. That column you keep, but all the other stuff that you might still consider important, but you can negotiate more time or whatever it's going to be, for you to get out of this slum, you need to declare bankruptcy. You basically need to tear that piece of paper off and throw it in the trash can, because that is the stuff that's going to weigh you down. Your mind essentially is going to see there being so much stuff that you don't know where to begin. And I have this all the time where I start writing my what am I doing today list, and I start putting on all of the things that I'd love to get done today, not what I realistically can get done. And then suddenly you have so much stuff. I mean, if you get to the point where you're literally writing around the side of the page to try and fit more words into your what I'm doing today list, it's a pretty bad sign. But that's exactly what I think a lot of us do, is we have so much overwhelm that we don't know where to begin, and it's just way easier to go back to bed than it is going to be to actually address this stuff. So by throwing all the other stuff out, it doesn't mean that you won't get onto it, it doesn't mean you won't deal with it, but it means that you've created a list, a priority list of what needs to be done in order for you to get back on top. Okay. With the other stuff, like if it's important, then they will email you back and say, hey, what's going on? Or you can at least email them and say, hey, I need more time. But you've already acknowledged that this isn't going to kill you, so let it go. And that's how I treat, I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb all day long. And that's, for me, the easiest way to kind of just get stuff done without getting too distracted. So the thing is that, if I get a bunch of missed calls from numbers that I don't recognize, then I'm not going to call them all back. I kind of figure, okay, I don't know who that person is, and if it's important, they will call back or they'll leave a voicemail. And usually, I'll listen to voicemail and decide whether or not, that's something that I want to jump on or not. And I mention this because I think it's the same way with everything else. If that thing that you are so stressed about and need to get done, or you think is important, if you neglect it, if it's really important, that person's going to follow up and say, hey, what's going on? When can I get this? And then hopefully you've bought a few days anyway. And that way you're allowing yourself time to kind of prioritize and consume things at a bit more of a realistic pace. So it might sound like a simple concept, but honestly, being able to mentally say no to a lot of the stuff that is stopping you is so important to be able to get back on top. Otherwise, you're just going to have so much stuff, you won't get through it. So you handle the important shit, you throw the rest the fuck away, and you just allow yourself to focus on what's important. And then later, if you get a few people who are angry because you didn't reply to them or something's overdue, hopefully by this point, you've gotten far ahead and back on track enough that you can deal with the other crap that's starting to resurface. So you're offsetting that by allowing a bit of an extension on those things, so that way they'll organically come back. And this might sound so trivial, but for me, one of the things that I seem to do every single month is I pay my rent at the very last minute, same way that we all pay our taxes. Usually we leave it to the last month or the last week or whatever. I love watching the news, and you have like lines going down the street because everyone's doing their taxes, because you do it when you absolutely need to do it. And for me, like, I do that with rent. I keep putting it off because I'm like, I gotta go write a check, and I gotta put it in an envelope. And actually, for me, it's like I gotta go to the bank and transfer some money from one account to another. And I gotta do this other stuff. Like, that sounds like it's gonna take up half of my day. So I put it off, and I do this every single time, and I've been doing this for years until a couple of months ago when I decided, okay, like, how about I break down the steps that I need to do? Like, what is that task that it sounds like a lot of work that I can't get done. So for me, it's like, go to the bank and transfer some money, wait in line. It's not that big a deal. I ended up just bringing a timer with me. I do this a lot, but hear me out. Basically, just setting a timer, walking out the door and going to the bank. And the bank actually is across the street from me. So going to the bank and paying my rent. I know it sounds like such a stupid small thing to procrastinate about, but I went and did that. And after that, I had no problem ever paying rent again, because I went to the bank, did all my stuff, and stopped the timer. And it took me exactly 6 minutes to leave my apartment, go to the bank, wait in line, and get it all paid. Okay, so the thing though is that once you're able to actually break down the task and realize it for what it is, it doesn't really have this big, kind of awry thing about it anymore. For me, it's like anytime I procrastinated, like, I don't have time to do this. It's like, that takes 6 minutes. Okay, I take showers that are probably longer than 6 minutes. Okay, like, you have time to go do this. And that takes away the power it has over you, because your mind is always going to make something into a much bigger thing than it is. Like, there's going to be times where someone might come to you and say, like, I need you to change this stuff. And you're like, I don't have time. I don't want to do that. And you'd rather fight them on it than do it. And if you actually sit down and say, you know what? Okay, I got to open up the file. I got to make this change, render it out, and then comp it. You know what? Like, breaking down the steps, that means that maybe, you can start to simplify it a little bit and realize, you know what? Like, I can actually get that all done by lunch, or, in the next hour if I actually just got onto it, rather than, assuming it's going to be a lot bigger than it is. So I just mentioned that because I think that a lot of times our minds are going to always blow shit out of proportion and make things much bigger than they can be. So for us being kind of demotivated and feeling that backlog overwhelm that I mentioned, that's exactly it, where it sounds like it's impossible to get back on track. But if you throw away what isn't important and the things that are important that still sound like hell to get done, if you simply just break them down into steps, they're a lot easier to achieve, rather than your mind basically saying, like, it's too much, you don't know where to begin, I don't know how to deal with it, just it's easier to run away. And I met M. Night Shyamalan, the director of like Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and some other not so good films, but as well. But I remember talking to him about, when he was writing Sixth Sense, and basically how what he preferred was always that your imagination is always going to be way scarier than anything that he could ever come up with. So, if he were to show some like big monster leaping out at you, that's not going to be nearly as terrifying as like not showing it and allowing your imagination to come up with something way more terrifying. And, I think that always stuck with me, and not necessarily to do with like scary films, but more to do with the fact that, our imaginations will kind of concoct things and blow them way out of proportion than they actually are. And I think that's exactly what happens a lot of times when we lose that motivation, when we lose that inspiration. It's exactly because our minds are basically making things more grandiose than they actually are. And if you're able to just kind of simplify it into like, look, here's my recipe. I've got to go do these 6 steps and that task is done. And also when you cross stuff off of your list, your body produces dopamine. In other words, it makes you happy physically crossing stuff off. Actually, not lately. I've done this for a while now, where even if there's tasks that I've done that aren't on my list, I'll put them on my list just so I can cross them off, because I know I'm going to feel better about it, and I'll feel more accomplished at the end just to see all the stuff that I've done that day. And I can actually kind of measure, what I've done. I remember yesterday, I was telling someone that like, I don't know why I do know why I'm so exhausted. I'm literally ready to collapse. I'm so exhausted, but because I didn't really have like a list I'm marking off, I couldn't really measure what the hell I actually did that day. I know I got a crap load done, but I don't really remember, and I don't really want to remember what I actually did. But just having that list and crossing it off, it makes you feel like you're moving ahead. And I think especially when you're down and out, it's so important to actually have that motivation to and way to kind of say like, look, you're doing good, you're at the halfway mark. Whereas like if you don't have that, if you don't, you basically just have that overwhelm rather than being able to measure it, then you don't know whether you've done well or you're failing or where you're at. And it's just another physical way to kind of keep you nailed to your purpose of moving forward. So for me, in the past couple of months, like I ended up taking on a project where I'd initially bid it for a much bigger schedule, and just like it always happens, basically what happened was the schedule got compacted literally by half. So I had twice the amount of work to get done in a smaller amount of time, which I was okay with. To me, this was more a passion project anyway, but that ended up being something that did take over everything else I had going on. On top of that, I've kind of gone through, as you probably can tell by the subject, but a bit of a kind of breakup at the moment, as well as a lot of other, there's just been a lot of stuff like a wedding for a friend as a groomsman. So that might take up a few days, but then on top of that, I was a judge for the CG Awards, and usually at the end of that, you've got to write a lot of congratulatory speeches. So like last year or the year before, I had to write one for both ILM and Weta, basically congratulating them for all the work they had done and achieved for a couple of films that year. And like that's the kind of stuff that all these little bits and pieces. Trying to think of what else. Yeah, like short film, mentorship. I've been doing some live webinar stuff. I don't know, lots of different stuff that's kind of been slowly building up. I've been on a couple of shoots, and all this stuff kind of over time, like the little bits and pieces, it's easy. And this is exactly what happened to me. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to focus on that big project because that's one that's impending and the big deadline. So you put the other stuff aside and the other stuff, and like bit by bit, all these things like the podcast, it's like, oh crap, I'll do it next Monday. Then weekend comes around, big deadline, you miss your so-called deadline. So you, for the podcast, so you push it back another week, and things you start to let slip. And the thing is that like most of this stuff, if you actually broke down the steps, it's like, okay, if I were just to get up an hour earlier every day, I could get, all these other things done. But instead it's easy to feel that overwhelm because you don't physically write down that recipe of like, okay, if I just do these 5 things, it'll be done. Instead, it's like, oh, this big daunting thing that's hanging over you, that is so much easier just to not do it than to actually, say, okay, well, what's involved? I gotta go and research this thing, write my notes, come up with, the concepts of what I want to cover, go do it, edit, whatever, or find other people that can help with those things as well. So again, those are all, I think, very key. And, it's a matter of, if we don't do those things, then you fall behind. And again, that's another thing with schedule, because it's all about really measuring what you're doing. And if you're able to measure your steps in terms of where you're at, then you can see how much you're winning. That's why I think the biggest thing has also been just going into your Gmail calendar or whatever it's going to be and literally writing down what you need to do that day, and give yourself some leeway if you want. But if you put that in the calendar, I mean, you're more likely to get stuff done. I always say that if it's not in the calendar, then it's not real. It's not going to get done, so just by simply blocking stuff out physically into a calendar, it means that now it's created, you're accountable for it. You know at least in a linear fashion what you need to get done that day, rather than it being like, all right, I'm just going going to wing it and, whatever comes this way happens or whatever, because that's not going to ever be a productive day where you don't really have a clear idea of your recipe for the day. And that's exactly what your calendar or your daily planner is exactly doing. So I know this has been a big rant, and I'm kind of getting back in the habit of putting these out, but I do think that it is such a important subject, and I think that we all deal with this, and we don't necessarily talk to other people about it, and that's why I thought at least mentioning a few times where I've seen it have such drastic repercussions for not addressing it, I think maybe might help people kind of understand a bit better. We all go through it, but it's more about what you do in those situations. So I think the key kind of steps here is that, we all have those moments that knock us down, that derail us, that we want to give up, and you lose that hunger, you're emotional, and it's taking its toll. But I think as long as you acknowledge what you're going through rather than kind of ignoring it, have that moment to kind of face it, and then also kind of figure out what is it? What do I have to do to get back on track? And what are the things that are weighing me down? So build that list, tear off the bits that, aren't important, and, from there, make yourself accountable and start to address those key steps. Build a recipe, as I said, each one of those tasks that is weighing you down. If you break it down to a simple instructions on how to approach it, deconstruct each task, you'll get it done, and, get back on there and, find that motivation, find the things that you do enjoy that can distract you from the shit that you're dealing with right now. I guess having those things that always do motivate you kind of brings you back to the reality of, why do I enjoy doing this? The past couple of months, in conjunction with the mentorship, I've been working on a bunch of filmmaking projects that I'll be announcing pretty soon. And for me, I've directed a few projects in the past, more commercial stuff like that, but for me, this has been something that I've finally found kind of motivation and inspiration again, whereas I haven't had it for a while, getting to enjoy the stuff, where I'm getting up really early in the morning, going out for shoots, and getting to be a part of something that gets me passionate again. And finding something like that kind of makes you enjoy everything, it'll make everything else kind of fall back in place a lot easier. So anyway, I will leave it there because again, I think this has gone a lot longer than I intended it to be, but I think that in a lot of ways I'm kind of dusting off the microphone and kind of getting back on track myself. So like I said, I think this is all kind of relevant. So a couple things I'm just going to mention really quick. I mentioned at the beginning as well, but that is that I'm going to be doing some really fun stuff pretty soon with Periscope. I think that will be just a good platform to kind of jump on occasionally and just do a few kind of fun live events. So Periscope is it's bought by Twitter. It's essentially like a live video stream, and it just means that, if someone's broadcasting, they literally just jump on Periscope, and it'll pop up on your phone and say Alan's broadcasting or whatever, and you're able to kind of just swipe and jump into the session and be able to type and ask questions or whatever you want to do, and have a bit of fun in there where we can kind of talk as a group, and it'll be live broadcast. So I thought about doing some webinars, and I think Periscope I'd like to experiment with. I think ultimately I'm probably going to always be doing webinars, stuff like that, but I do want to experiment with this. But I figure it's worthwhile announcing it first, get as many people on board, and then start doing it. But I will be doing a few sessions pretty soon. Other than that, the contest that I've mentioned a while back, and unfortunately with everything going and getting derailed, I will be announcing that next week, and that will be that I will do a one-on-one consultation with you about your career and your steps. So if there's specific things that you're going through right now, whether it's changing careers, or whether you want to ask for more money or more responsibility, switch things up a bit, whatever it is, I'd be happy to kind of sit with you for half an hour or maybe a bit longer and kind of go over that stuff and maybe offer a few suggestions. So I think that could be a lot of fun, and I've done that in the past mainly just with friends, and it's always been very successful. And also within the mentorship, I've done that as a group, and again, it's been a lot of fun. So that is it, I think. Basically, follow me on Periscope, which is just a Twitter handle. So Alan FT McKay, and the FT stands for Francis Thomas. So Alan ALLAN FT MCKAY. And also my Instagram is just alanmckay1982 as well. So if you want to jump on either one of those definitely seem to be the two things that I'm going to be using a lot at the moment. So might be a great way to interact. And I will leave it there. I've got a few really cool episodes coming up finally with all this. So I'll be announcing a few soon, but I'm going to be doing one which I think it's going to be fun, but it's going to be basically I want to talk about programming and scripting for artists. So, not needing to know math, not needing to be a genius or anything, just ways that you can all benefit from, even in Photoshop, from learning a little bit of scripting and how easy it can be just, having a different kind of take on things or looking at things a little bit differently. Even the most visual and non-technical people are really able to pick this stuff up. And I kind of want to go through a few things about that. I'm also going to be interviewing Matt Conway, who's a matte painter extraordinaire. He's worked on everything from Scorsese films to Game of Thrones and everything in between. I've got Call of Duty guys. I've wanted to wait for the interview with them until Call of Duty Black Ops 3 ships in a couple of weeks. So I'll be doing that as well. There's a couple of really cool ones coming up though. Next Limit, the creators of RealFlow. Lots of cool stuff. So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you guys soon. If you want to leave any comments or feedback, I'd love it, especially kind of while I'm getting back into my groove again. So you can just go to the notes for this episode. So www.alanmckay.com/47. So 47. Okay, so thanks again, guys. I look forward to hopefully getting to interact with some of you guys. So hit me up on Periscope or Instagram, or leave a comment, because I'd love to start chatting and interacting a bit more with everyone and getting some of your feedback.